Hey, this is the Thursday Checkdown, and I'm your host, Greg Kellogg, with the co-host with the most, Tipp Major. And Tipp, I would have thought that the assassination attempt of President Trump would be the biggest news in America this week, but it's not. Tipp has acquired the one, the only, and I just lost my screen.
Well, it's Pat Fitzmaurice, guys. Pat Fitzmaurice. There he is. There he is, Pat. Thank you so much for joining us today, man. We really do appreciate it. I mean, look, this is my first time actually talking to you other than, DMing on Twitter. But I've been following you for years, man, on Fantasy Pros, now also with Betting Pros. And I got to say, man, your content, the stuff that you write, man, it's an honor and a pleasure, man, to actually be talking to you.
And we're going to talk not only about Pat and his career, we're going to talk a little bit about the Expo, because Pat and I are both going down there and going to be drafting, not against each other, but we're going to be drafting at the same time. And, man, I love your videos. And I'll tell you why I love your podcast. You're not afraid to disagree with your co-hosts. And I love that, because that gives the audience more to make their own decisions on their own questions. So many podcasts, the hosts are afraid to contradict each other. You guys are real analysts. You have different opinions and you speak them. How you doing tonight, Pat?
Oh, I'm doing well. Tipp and Greg, so great to be with you guys and talk to you. We've chatted backstage and everything, and awesome to finally get to chop it up with you. And thank you for the kind words, Greg. We try not to be too much of a Greek chorus with each other, where we just totally agree with everything everyone says. And a lot of times we do agree with each other on stuff, but there are definitely times where we are butting heads on players, and I think that makes for good conversation.
I think it makes for excellent copy. I really do. I think that is the content that you want, is people who aren't afraid to express their opinions when they may not be popular. Tonight, I want to ask you about some sleepers too, so we'll get into that a little bit too. But I got to ask you something. Is Ryan Wormley with you guys?
He is.
Did I hear right that he's actually from the Houston area?
No, Ryan is from the Baltimore area.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought I heard he was from Houston. And I'm like, well, I met Debro. I met Derek Brown up in Dallas because he was drafting for Scott Fish up there. But I've never met Ryan. I would love to meet him, too. If he's from Houston, I'm going to find out.
You know who it might be, Greg? It might be our co-host on the Dynasty podcast for Fantasy Pro, Scott Bogman. He lives in the Houston area.
Yeah. He does. Yeah.
So, but Wormley is from Baltimore originally, now living out in the Denver area. Bogman, I think, is from Arizona originally, now lives in the Houston area.
Yeah, and Harris.
So he went from heat to double heat. Yeah.
No kidding. He went from dry heat to humid heat. Yeah.
Okay, so Tipp, you brought him on. I'm going to let you have the very first question.
Yeah,
I start, but I want Tipp to start.
No, tonight. I appreciate it, Greg. Yeah, I mean, we are definitely going to talk about sleepers today, Pat. And we talked a little bit about sleepers that are their ADP is usually around the 120 range. A little bit past that. That's where you want to target your sleeper. Greg said it really great the first time I ever met him. He said you win your leagues in those later rounds. Your first few 3-4 rounds, you're picking studs. You're picking almost no-brainers. But those later rounds in the 5 to 9, 10, 11, 12 range, those are really when you can really, really step up your drafting and your team. So we want to talk a little bit about sleepers. So we're going to go with the sleeper at each position, ADP, in the more than 120. So we want to get your sleeper from there, and we can kind of talk about them. If we have a rebuttal, hey, we may talk about why we don't think that person's a sleeper as well. But we're going to start off with your quarterback sleeper for 2024.
All right. So if we're going later than 120, and I do actually think, Tipp, that it's a good year to wait on quarterbacks because it's a pretty deep position. There are guys outside of QB1 range I really like Caleb Williams, I think, could hit the ground running and be an impact performer right away. Jaden Daniels, who sometimes goes outside the top 12. Trevor Lawrence almost always goes outside the top 12 at receiver. And I don't think we've seen T-Law's best year yet. So, but sticking by the rules and going outside the top 120, my highest ranked guy outside of that range was Matthew Stafford, who is, I think, QB 19 with the Fantasy Pros overall ADP. And look, Stafford is definitely limited in that he's not going to get you any rushing value whatsoever. He's got to do it all with his arm. But I think he could do a lot with his arm this year, considering that he's got a pretty terrific pair of receivers in Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. Yeah. And he probably needs both of those guys to stay healthy. And, we're looking at a Rams team that just lost Aaron Donald, one of the greatest defensive tackles to ever play the game. I don't think that defense is going to be as good as it was last year. I think it's reasonable to expect at least a little bit of a downturn without Donald. And maybe that puts the Rams in a few more shootouts and ramps up the passing volume for Stafford.
I cheated. Okay. I went just inside 120, but I went with the quarterback that the last 4 years has finished 11, 11, 8, and then 24 last year. And he's going as QB 18 this year. He's going at pick, let me go look at my notes, 116. So I cheated a little bit. Kirk Cousins, he's not going to get you rushing yards, but he does seem to score a touchdown or two every year he plays. But this guy is the best passer that Atlanta's seen since Matt Ryan. So I think their passing game is going to be much stronger this year. They've got a running back that is going, he demands attention. Bijan is going to demand attention. And as a rookie, he caught 58 balls with nobody at quarterback. So I went with Kirk Cousins. Who did you go with there, Tipp?
Yeah, for me, I went a little bit deeper. I was like, who is the one guy that, I feel like is a young player,
say it's JJ.
Maybe coming into their second year. Definitely not him, Greg.
Okay.
But it's like for me, I look at a guy like Will Levis, and there's a few things that I look at when I look at Will Levis, right? So I look at the offensive line. Yes, the offensive line was in shambles last year. It's terrible offensive line. But what do they go and do? They go and get Callahan's son. And if you guys know what I'm talking about, Callahan, I'm talking about the great Bill Callahan, the orchestrator of some of the greatest offensive lines in the NFL, at least in the centuries that the century I've been watching it. So it's like it's really cool to see that. You have also another guy, Tyler Boyd, that drops everything in Bengal country, which, Bengal country is not a bad place to be as long as Joe Burrow's healthy. You know what he's going to do. And he drops everything to follow not only this coach, but maybe he believes in this kid too, Will Levis. So that really rung a bell in my head. I was like, man, okay, that's cool. And then they get Calvin Ridley. I love that pickup. I think Calvin Ridley, for him having an off year last year, still did some really good things. I think he's going to be that much better. Even Devontae Adams said he's one of the top 5 route runners in the league. And I believe it. I think Calvin Ridley is nice when it comes to route running. And then you have D-Hop. So, I think it's going to be an improved offensive line. Do I think it'll be a top 10, top 5? No, but it'll be improved. Will Levis, he can run the ball. He's athletic. You've seen pictures of the kid. He looks like a statue out there. He's chiseled. So, just like my guy, Greg. And so he has an opportunity to really surprise a lot of people. And getting him in like the 14th, I think his ADP right now is 153. Getting him late in those rounds, man, look, if you can really do some damage in a 1 QB league. In a 2 QB league, it's probably going to go a lot earlier, but you can really do some damage, I think, with Will Levis. If the stars align, everything comes to fruition. And then their defense is their defense is always good. And I like what Pat talked about, noticing that if you're going to be in a team that their defense may have lost a Hall of Fame player, they might be in some shootouts. They might be a situation where they'll be in some shootout. I think that could also be with Tennessee. They did get a couple of really good DBs. But I still think that could be something that they experience too, especially in that AFC South, which I think is going to be a really fun division to watch this year.
Yeah, before we go on to running backs, I did want to mention Bob Harris is a mentor of mine. Bob Harris and I used to talk till 3 a.m. Anybody that listened to our show has heard me say that. Bob Harris is the one that taught me that you can never win your league in the first round, but you can lose it. So I tend to avoid, I won't take Jaden Daniels in the first round, which I've seen happen. I won't take Caleb Williams in the first round. Too much risk for me. I won't take Anthony Richardson in the first round, even though he may have the highest upside, the highest ceiling of any quarterback this year. He played in 4 games and got hurt in 2 of them. So to me, there's too much risk right now. But now we need to go to running backs. Who you got, Pat?
Yeah. First, can I just say how awesome it is that Tipp shouted out Bill Callahan? And I do think that, like, Bill Callahan, now working for his son, the new head coach, Brian Callahan, I think he will immediately upgrade that offensive line. And I'm just a big fan of Bill Callahan because I'm a University of Wisconsin alumnus. And back in the Barry Alvarez era, when Barry Alvarez was coaching the team, his first offensive line coach at Wisconsin was Bill Callahan. And that quickly became a signature area for the Wisconsin Badgers back in the day.
They're still a great running team.
Yes.
To this day, yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, like, Bill Callahan built some awesome offensive lines at Wisconsin and pretty much kept doing it everywhere he stopped in the NFL. So maybe one of the greatest offensive line coaches of all time, I think, without question, and possibly the best. So, on to running back. I'll throw out Jaleel McLaughlin, who's going like in the 50s at running back and well outside this range. One thing about the Broncos this year, I think they're going to throw a lot of passes to their running backs. And that's sort of how Sean Payton operated the offense in New Orleans when he was there for all those years. And if you look at Bo Nix's college career, he threw to his running backs at a much higher percentage than pretty much any other quarterback prospect in this class. He is a check down king, just as Drew Brees was in New Orleans. So I think there are going to be a lot of passes to go around to these running backs. Now, it might be chopped up in an annoying number of ways. Jamal Williams gets some. Jaleel McLaughlin gets some. Samaje Perine might annoy us by catching 40 passes. But I do think McLaughlin's going to be part of that. He was kind of involved as a pass catcher last year. And you watch this guy, and he's got some juice. Like, he is maybe the most explosive guy they have. I mean, Javante's maybe a little more known for his power than his speed. And so I think McLaughlin's going to have a role in, granted, what figures to be a committee backfield, but I think it could be kind of a valuable role. I like the idea of getting him in the late rounds. And the other thing, I recently heard Sean Payton praising Jaleel McLaughlin for being one of those guys who's like always among the first people into team headquarters on any sort of OTA day, workout day, whatever. Like, he's there bright and early. So his work ethic has been noticed by his coaches, and that can't hurt.
Do you think that Audic Estime could make Javonte Williams superfluous?
I want to give Javonte a mulligan on his disappointing 2023 because he's now more than a full year removed from that devastating knee injury. Like, Javonte was so much fun to watch early on when he first got into the league, even though he had to share work with Melvin Gordon at the time. I'm hoping he's something more like the running back we saw in his rookie year when people were mad that they were making him share carries with Melvin Gordon and wanted Melvin to disappear. So I'm hoping that we see more of that Javonte. But Estime is interesting, Greg, for sure. Like, he is a thumper, man. Yep. You can time him with a sundial, but man, like, he could be a goal line force.
Yeah, he moves the pile. He does do that.
Yes.
Okay, so for me, I went deeper. I like Jaleel. I've been drafting him as like RB4, RB5 on my rosters. But this is where you find your league winners. Your league winners are the sleepers that explode and become, top 12 guys at their position. I went with the running back 51 currently. His ADP is 153. He's in a committee, but I think that Kamani Vidal is going to win the starting job there simply because you look at Gus Edwards. I love Gus Edwards, but he has had he's had more than 6 touchdowns exactly one time in his career, and that was last year. That was the only year he ever had double-digit touchdowns. He's never had more than 850 rushing yards, and he's not a receiver out of the backfield at all. You got Kamani Vidal. The kid is 5'8" and 215. That's a solid build. That is a strong kid. And he ran a 4.46 40, which is pretty good. His numbers, actually, I looked at his numbers. His 3-cone drill was better than Christian McCaffrey's was coming out. It was better than Derrick Henry's. His 40 was better than Derrick Henry's. And people will say, well, he's a 6th-round pick. He's got no draft capital. Hey, if you like the Broncos, then you know a running back that went in the 6th round. Guy named TD comes to mind. He was a 6th-round pick. You got a guy that went in the 7th round named Bo Jackson. Bo does sports. And you got a guy that was undrafted named Priest Holmes that did a little bit. So there's nothing that's keeping this kid. Now, I'm not saying he's Priest Holmes or Terrell Davis, but I think he's the most explosive running back on that roster because I don't think J.K. Dobbins is ever coming back. He tore an Achilles. And the only running back that I know of that came back from an Achilles tear was Cam Akers, and Cam Akers sucked when he came back from the Achilles tear. So that's mine. I'm going Kamani Vidal. I'm saying that he will be the starter by week 4, if not sooner. Tip, your turn.
Ooh, Greg with the hot take. Okay, I like Vidal. I like McLaughlin. And see, the other thing that I feel like we're doing, and when you have to go for these deeper sleepers like that, is you have to go on, try to find that running back that you might luck out, and there might be a couple of injuries. Of course, knock on wood, we don't ever want that. But I did the same thing. I went after the Chicago Bears, Roschon Johnson. His ADP right now is 169. And look, he is playing with DeAndre Swift, who has issues sometimes staying on the field, Khalil Herbert, who sometimes has issues staying on the field. He's sandwiched in between those 2 guys. Now, I know he got banged up last year. I want to say one of his injuries was a concussion. So, I mean, those are kind of those freak things that happen in the game. Unfortunately,
unless your name's Tua. Then it seems to happen every week. Yeah.
Yeah, but like those things happen in the league. And, now I'm happy with the protocol. They take their player out for the next week at least. So those are some precautionary things that they did. But I love Roschon Johnson. I think that he's still got a lot of tread on those tires. He's a young guy. He's a big back. You talked about Kamani Vidal. Maybe he's not a small back, but he's shorter. This guy's 6'1", 6 foot. Roschon Johnson can
bigger target, buddy. 6'1", bigger target.
Yeah, bigger guy, and just one of those guys that I feel like even if he does carve a role into this league, into this team, it might be a goal line guy, and they're going to move the ball. Pat just talked about being up on Caleb Williams, so they're going to move the ball with that team. That's one thing I don't think they're going to have a problem with. I want to
bring Pat back on because he did mention Caleb Williams, and my concern about Caleb Williams, Pat, is that he's playing outside in very inclement weather. In November and December, Chicago is not a good place to play. It's very difficult, and he's a young guy. Do you think that impacts the Bears' ability to move the ball?
Interesting. Yeah, I guess we'll have to find out whether Caleb can be a cold weather guy. But then again, like, I am a Packers fan, a Wisconsin native, and we saw Brett Favre, a Mississippi native, come up and become one of the best cold weather quarterbacks ever to play the game. So it can be done. I'm not going to discount Caleb just because he's coming from warmer climates, but you're not kidding about Soldier Field though, Greg. I mean, it's right out there on a little peninsula, jutting out onto Lake Michigan. The wind and cold there when it's nasty in December.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've experienced that. It can be a little chilly.
Well, thank you, but let's move on to the wide receivers now.
Go
Your
ahead,
turn,
Pat.
Frank.
So, who do you
Okay.
got for wide receiver?
Man, I'm going with the golden oldie here. I'm going to go with Brandon Cooks. And
Okay.
I always used to, and I didn't mean to say this about Brandon Cooks in a derisive sort of way. I sort of refer to him as the cockroach of the NFL because he could adapt to any situation. He kept getting traded and going to new teams, and sometimes those new teams had pretty ugly quarterback situations. And Brandon Cooks just kept churning out 1,000-yard seasons everywhere he went.
So, Pat,
And
is he quarterback proof?
I would say he's pretty close to quarterback proof, Tip. But the weird thing is he didn't really click last year in Dallas, and Dak Prescott didn't really target him at a high rate. Maybe because Dak was just so locked in on CeeDee Lamb,
Oh,
who obviously he
Yeah.
threw to quite a bit last year. And, Jake Ferguson kind of played a role too. Shout out to my Wisconsin Badger there. So, but no, I think, and even with sort of a disappointing year in terms of catches and yardage, Brandon Cook still scored 8 touchdowns
Yeah.
last year. So he still contributed. I think he's going to contribute in a bigger way. It was sort of an upset that the Cowboys didn't really add anything to their wide receiver room. And I don't know. I think that we are maybe going to see a better season for Brandon Cooks, his second year playing with Dak, especially if maybe defenses start rolling safety help over to CeeDee Lamb. Maybe the occasional double team. Like they're going to need someone else. I don't know if Jalen Tolbert's ready for prime time. I wouldn't be surprised if Brandon Cooks had a nice season and he's going at like wide receiver 60 right now.
And that's a great place to be because Cooks is like Mike Evans, 1,000 yards every year, it seems like. It really does. I went with the wide receiver 51. Something about that 51 number I like. Running back 51, wide receiver 51. He's never really done it, but he's in the best situation of his career, and that's Curtis Samuel. I believe he'll be the number one target for Josh Allen, and the number one target for the Bills over the last 4 years has averaged 161 targets, 112 receptions, 1,350 yards, and 9 TDs. Now, do I expect Curtis Samuel to put up those numbers? No, because I don't think he's going to get that many targets. His name isn't Diggs. But I do expect him to get 140 to 150 targets. And if he does that, he can get 100 receptions. He will get 1,200 yards, and he can score in that offense. Josh Allen is one of the best quarterbacks throwing the ball in the league. And I don't think that's going to stop because Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs changed area codes. So I'm going with Curtis Samuel, and he's a guy I think that could easily be a wide receiver 1 by the end of the year. Tip, your turn.
And you know what, Greg? You know what I love that you said that you said Curtis Samuel. And one thing too, man, is he's reuniting with Joe Brady. So that's also pretty freaking like. I want to say that he had his career year with him, or something.
Yeah, but that was like 60 catches and 600 yards.
Yeah, and I think he can destroy that, in this offense.
Do too, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I really like that call, and that had to grow on me because at the beginning of the season I was more Khalil Shakir. I was more Shakir, and then you already see him getting a little injured. But nonetheless, I'm gonna go with my guy. And this guy, he's really close to the 120 spot, but as far as ADP goes, but it's Romeo Doubs, and I'll tell you what, I know that they've got about 20 wide receivers over on that team, and all of them can play. I know. And I know, Pat, you're probably really close to that team, or, at least in the area. So you probably get to see and hear a lot about, all of these wide receivers that they have. Well, I'm going to take you back to the game that they played in Dallas last year. Romeo Doubs showed out. And it was on, I want to say 6 catches, 150 yards, a touchdown. Like, he was just torching the Dallas Cowboys. Now, a lot of that could be contributed to them not having Diggs and, Bland. I know he plays usually the other guys, or maybe he didn't know who to play because they got so many good wide receivers, and you can move Romeo Doubs around. So I think that Romeo Doubs could be one of those guys, a really sneaky guy, maybe as a fourth or fifth wide receiver on your squad. You might be happy because you could get a third wide receiver value out of him. Maybe if I'm going to go with my bold prediction, which I'll say I think he gets 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns this year on about 70 catches. I think
that would kill me.
I think it's
I've
something
been drafting Christian Watson.
I think it's something doable for him, man. And you know what? It's just what I was gonna say is the thing that I go back to at the postseason. That's something that I look at when I look in for the next season. I go back and look at the postseason stats, or if they did make the postseason, the last couple of games of the year, and I go and see, okay, what type of trends did I notice? Now, I know Christian Watson was a little banged up again last year in the postseason, but Wicks only got like 4 targets in the whole postseason. Jalen Reed had 7 in the whole postseason. Romeo Doubs led it with 12. Now, I know you say 12 in 2 games, 6 a target. That's not a lot, but he did everything with those opportunities. And so now maybe the coaching staff, maybe Jordan Love, and if you guys are out there, you know, if you are fans of Madden, I think it was Madden, where Jordan Love was giving out all of his wide receivers, and he talked about Romeo Doubs. He had to add Romeo Doubs in there. Of course, he had really other great wide receivers in there, but he had to add Romeo Doubs because he says, because that's my guy and I trust him. And when he said that sold me.
Well, I think it's a brave call. Like I said, I'm going with Christian Watson, but we just don't know right now. But Vince in the chat was asking about, what about Mooney from Atlanta? Oh. So what do you think about Darnell Mooney? And Pat, we'll go to you right after Tipp answers. Tipp, answer. What do you think about Darnell Mooney?
I'm still processing with him because it's like, are there enough? You got Drake London, you've got Kyle Pitts, excuse me. You have Rondale Moore, but I really think it's Bijan's season, man. I think Bijan is really going to take the reins and just it's going to be hard to give him the ball about 15 to 20 times a game. Tyler Algier will probably get mixed in there a little bit too. Drake London about 8 targets to 10 targets a game. Don't forget about Kyle Pitts. He's going to get some targets as well. I just think Mooney might get lost in that translation from time to time. Now, he's a great deep threat. He might do some things for you there in a best ball, but if it's a long redraft season, and he might even be a good sneaky DFS play. I'm talking about Mooney a couple of weeks, but for the long haul, I don't know if I want that, man. I just don't want that.
What do you think?
I think Mooney's really underrated. I think he's a really good player. I've had this female follower on Twitter for a long time who she's awesome, and I have this great rapport with her, and she went to Tulane. And when Mooney came out of college, she's like, don't sleep on Darnell Mooney. This guy's really good. And yeah, she was right. Like, Mooney can ball out. But I think I maybe share some of Tipp's concerns about just what the target count is going to look like. I do think Drake London leads this team in target, and Kyle Pitts is probably going to get more work than he saw last year with Arthur Smith calling the plays. But I mean, I'm more interested in Darnell Mooney in best ball than I am in a managed redraft league, just because I think it's going to be, and I think Tipp was kind of hinting at this, it's going to be hard to know when to start him. Like, there are probably going to be a couple big games where you're like, oh man, I had Darnell Mooney on my bench, but how do you know when to start him if he's maybe averaging like 4 targets a game? So
my problem is that he's a deep receiver, and Kirk Cousins is a great intermediate thrower. He gets everything short and intermediate. He does not throw the ball well deep. That's not his strength. So I agree with both of you. I think reasonably 800 yards and 6 or 7 touchdowns, which makes him a good wide receiver 3 for you, but he's not, I don't think you consider him a sleeper, a guy that's going to pop up and give you wide receiver 1 numbers. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the tight ends because I have a rule. I don't draft sleeper tight ends. I try to get a top 5 tight end in the first, second, or third round. I will not, if I miss the top 5 tight ends, I punt tight ends till the end of the draft. And this year I'm taking Mike Gesicki, which may or may not be a good call, but he's not really a sleeper. I don't think after the first 5 or 6 tight ends, any of them are any different from any of the other ones. You're going to have some good weeks, some bad weeks, but overall they're going to be 8 to 10 points per game. So, Pat, do you have a sleeper tight end?
I do, and I'm cheating a little here, Greg, because this guy is just barely outside the top 120. It's Pat Freiermuth. And it's sort of pretty surface level analysis, if we're being honest, that kind of one of those situations. Who else is going to get targets in Pittsburgh?
Roman Wilson.
I like Roman Wilson. Van Jefferson is apparently running ahead of him as the number 2 receiver right now, but that's the thing. If we're talking about Van Jefferson as your number 2 receiver, there's some targets available.
Yeah.
And even George Pickens, who did have some really nice games last year early in the season when Deontay Johnson was on IR with a hamstring injury. Even so, George Pickens has never really commanded a massive target load. He's not like a Devontae Adams guy who's going to be getting 12, 13, 14 targets every week. So I think Freiermuth is going to have a substantial role here for Arthur Smith, who is a former tight ends coach. And man, if you look at what he did with the Falcons last year in terms of distribution to his tight ends, I know Pitts was kind of disappointing, but collectively Falcons tight ends had something like 130 targets and 80 or 90 catches and 13 or 1400 yards. Their collective between Pitts, Jonnu, and some of the other dudes who were there.
Yeah.
Pretty substantial output. Yeah. I'm not too worried about Darnell Washington cutting into Pat Freiermuth's target share.
He's a tackle. He's just a tackle.
Yeah, or Ironhead's kid. It's going to be the Freiermuth show, I think. And this is a dude who a couple of years ago had over 700 receiving yards. So I think he can do it. Just needs to stay healthy.
He's got to get in the end zone. That's what he's got to do.
That too.
Get in the end zone. Yeah.
That too. He scored some. He scored 7 or 8 as a rookie, but then that year where he had 700 receiving yards, he had 1 or 2 touchdowns. So yes, he does need more TDs.
Just put it together. Exactly. Tip, who do you got?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking some tight ends, and I love the Pat Freiermuth. I've been really looking at him a lot lately. I got him in the Scott Fish Bowl. I think that he is a tight end that we could see really have a lot of receptions this year. The touchdowns maybe, but I could see him being a focal point. But my guy that I picked was Dalton Schultz. And hear me out, guys, because everybody's going to be like, well, they got Stephon Diggs. They've got Tank Dell. They've got Nico Collins. They also are playing football. And what happens in football, you're going to get banged up. You never wish it, but that's something that can happen. And I think even if these guys are healthy, I think Dalton Schultz can be one of those middle fielders, those seam route guys, those intermediate route guys that just keeps getting passes thrown at him because you've got too much to worry about. And then you got to worry about, Joe Mixon coming out of the backfield, maybe even Dameon Pierce if they decide to split carries. And you got to worry about CJ Stroud. I mean, so there's a lot to worry about on this offense. Dalton Schultz in 2021 broke for over 800 yards. I don't think he quite gets there. I think he can get in about the 650, 750 range. But he can get I would say at least 6+ touchdowns too. Because everybody's going to be so worried about this offense that I can see at the beginning of the season, we see a big blow up from Dalton Schultz game, first few weeks, and people are rushing to the waiver wire. Well, I want to be one of those guys that has him so that way you can use that for trade bait, or, hey, if you don't have a really good tight end because tight ends or that is your first tight ends because they're so deep this year, you could do that too. So I'm going after guys like Dalton Schultz, as a secondary tight end. But yeah, that's where I'm going.
Well, I'm going to do the first kicker too because I do have a sleeper kicker.
Oh my gosh, we got to talk about this kicker.
And he doesn't even have a job yet, but he signed a $1.8 million 2-year contract. He kicked 360-yarders last year. He didn't kick any extra points. He didn't make a single extra point last year because the UFL doesn't kick extra points. They run them or they pass for him. But he was 6 of 10 from over 50 yards, which is pretty good. He missed one kick under 50 yards. He averaged 8 points per game despite not scoring in 2 of his 11 games. And I kind of said, well, if he could maintain that in the NFL on a 17-game schedule, plus Detroit scored 58 touchdowns, plus he got 58 extra points using Scott Fish's scoring, he would have scored over 19 points a game last year with just what he was doing. And, that would have been a point and a half better than Brandon Aubrey, who was the top scorer in Scott Fish scoring for kickers. So I think Jake Bates, you bring him in because with the new kickoff rule, you have to have somebody who can kick the ball out of the end zone. And Detroit does not have that. I like Badgley. He's very consistent. He will be playing somewhere, but you don't give $250,000 guaranteed. 100,000 signing, 150,000 guaranteed, plus 1.8 million. I'm pretty sure that's more than what they're paying Badgley. So I'm pretty sure Jake Bates is the Detroit Lions kicker next year, and that's a kicker on a high-powered offense with a super strong leg. I'm going Jake Bates. Pat, do you have a kicker that you like? Oh, I don't remember what his ADP is. All kickers are over 120. So it doesn't matter. Yeah, all kickers are over 120.
Oh, man. So not really a sleeper, but I'll go with Jason Sanders, just getting back to what I had said earlier about the Dolphins, maybe their defense being greatly diminished without Vic Fangio and without some of the guys they've lost on defense, guys like Christian Wilkins and Andrew Van Ginkel and Xavier Howard. So maybe they give up more points and they get more shootouts and score more points themselves. And I always like a warm weather kicker. So let's go with Jason Sanders. Not the deep sleeper you have, Greg. I can't pull out guys like that. I
have a dome kicker. So I know that for Bates, of his misses, I know what happened he had, 5 misses total. One, I don't know whether it was inside or out, but 3 of them were on grass outside. I think they were all against Birmingham too, who was the best team they played in that league. And one of them was inside. But, 4 of his misses were from over 50 yards. How many NFL kickers don't miss from over 50 yards? So, Tipp, who do you like? I know you don't like Bates.
Greg, you just always have no. Every time
I've been getting in Twitter fights with Anthony, 2 fat guys. Is it two fat guys?
Yeah.
Anthony, because he says I don't take kickers that don't have a job. I said, take him as a backup. You're getting him in the 20th round. You can always cut him later. He says, I don't take kickers that don't have. We've been going back and forth about that.
No, Greg, it's just funny because you always got to bring some sort of Michigander.
Oh yeah, I'm a
Michigander. Something into the
Pat
conversation.
To use Braylon Allen as his running back. So.
See, look, we got you. We got
Ohio State wins whenever I say the M word. And that's okay because it's been so long since they've won, it doesn't bother me.
For me, hey, kickers need love too. So I'm gonna go with Matt Gay with the Indianapolis Colts. I like to get a kicker, of course, who's in a dome. Warm weather kickers are great as well, but I also like to get a kicker that I don't know about their offense. Is their offense going to be like, for instance, I wouldn't go after somebody on the Texans or the Eagles or even the Kansas City Chiefs, because that offense, a lot of times they're going to score the touchdown. They're not going to go for the 3, and they're going to be very aggressive to get that touchdown. So my thing is,
except Tip, in Scott Fishbowl, you get 3.3 points for a point after touchdown.
Yes, now that's huge. That is huge for the Scott Fishbowl. Now, if we're talking redraft, though, I like a team or somebody who's gonna run, methodically get the ball down the field, but then stall around the 30-yard line and just can't get it into the end zone for whatever reason. I'm not saying I'm down on the Indianapolis Colts offense. I'm not down on their offense by any means. I think it's going to be a really good offense. I think it might be a slower moving offense than some people think, and then they might stall a lot of times because of Anthony Richardson getting acclimated back to the speed again of the game. Just things happen. He may not get the right read the first time. I know a lot of people were talking about that at the beginning when he first came out. His his deep ball accuracy is great, but reading an actual defense, sometimes he struggles with that. He may get you the yardage to get to that point where you can kick it and go. So I like Matt Gay. I just looked at him and I was like, oh, I like him. He's formidable. He's done a good job. But if you can't get the top guys like Justin Tucker or Aubrey or some of the other guys out there, then yeah, I wouldn't be mad with somebody like that.
Okay, so now we're going to take a short break if Iggy and JC have the ad for drafters queued up.
Here we go.
Money, making crap for money. Money, and money, making crap for money. Money, yeah. Money, making crap for money.
We want to thank drafters for sponsoring us first and foremost. It's hard to make money in this industry, and Fantasy Pros is one of the few places where they do make money. And so, Pat, I got to ask you, when I started, there were no podcasts. Bob Harris and I, we would cut up interviews that we would copy from TV and then pretend that we asked the questions and just play back the responses that the players had. That was our podcast. And then Blog Talk Radio came out, and we did some audio interviews where they were Gary Davenport and I did those audio interviews where we would actually interview people, and that was fun. But now everybody and their brother has a podcast. And how many people are writing? Are you still writing? Did you start writing?
I'm still writing, and probably need to crank up the output a little bit as we're getting closer to the season and start writing more and just shackle myself to my desk. But yeah, I know what you mean about the way of a podcast, Greg. Like I like listening to a lot of different podcasts around the industry, hearing different voices. I can't possibly keep up, and it's frustrating, especially since I'm not the kind of guy who can listen at like, my wife listens to podcasts at 1.5 speeds. I know some people like to do it at double speeds. Like I just need, especially if I'm trying to work and listen to a podcast at the same time, I can't be listening to, people sounding like Alvin and the Chipmunks. I just like have to hear the conversation at a normal rate. So, and it's tough. I can't possibly keep up and listen to all the shows I want to listen to. But yeah, we're contributing to the podcast pollution at Fantasy Pros because, we have a weekly Dynasty podcast. We have, a new podcast on the Fantasy Pros football show pretty much every day during the week. So, we're putting a lot of shows out there into the podcast space as well. But it's great, though. I mean, it's amazing. I'm always kind of amazed to look and see the traffic like one of our Dynasty podcasts gets in like late February when there's nothing Super Bowl's over. You'd think like everyone would be totally checked out on football for a while. Nope. Still hundreds and hundreds of people interested in, getting an early look at the upcoming draft and hearing about some of the rookies and other guys were early takes for the following season that isn't going to kick off for another 6-7 months. So
I'm one of those guys. I'm retired. So I watch a lot of YouTube. Fantasy footballers, FF Today, Fantasy Pros, Football Guys, Salvetri. Never heard of Salvetri before, but I saw a couple of his podcasts and I loved it. I don't do micro analytics, but I love it when somebody does it for me. They go out and they get there and I look at it. I never even heard of ADOT before this year. ADOT seems to be a standard thing. I think you guys use ECR in your podcast. You say the term ECR.
Yeah.
I had to ask what that was. I had to ask Derek Brown what that was because I had no idea. It's the industry composite or something for ranking?
Expert consensus rankings.
There you
that's
go.
basically all the people who do rankings on the Fantasy Pros ranker platform get thrown in with ECR, and that's good because it's kind of a wisdom of crowds things and gives us this consensus ranking among people who are in the fantasy space and putting out content and doing rankings. So
no, I think it's good. I just didn't know what it was. So when someone would say, I go to Fantasy Pros to get your ADP all the time. You are, in my opinion, the most quoted website out there. And I know Football Guys is huge. I understand that. And I love Joe Bryant because he and I formed FanX together years ago. So we're good friends. Bob Harris is there now. But Fantasy Pros has probably, in my opinion, the best, most easily used ADP tool there is out there. Now, I don't know about you. I'm going to ask you one more question, then turn it over to Tipp. But I use ADP to get an idea for where a player is going, but I don't follow it when I draft. If I want Blake Corum, I'm going to draft him 2 rounds before his ADP because I want to make sure I get Blake Corum. I don't want to lose him by waiting till the last minute. And I'm not all that concerned about getting a guy that's 2 rounds after his ADP. If I like the guy, I draft him. If I don't, I don't. It's that simple. Are you the same way, or are you a believer in ADP?
I'm kind of with you, Greg. I mean, it's a good way to take the temperature on the market and see where people are at. But as Derek Brown says, get your guys. If you are trying to adhere to ADP and thinking you can, this guy's ADP is this, he's going to be there for me in the next round. Someone else snaps him up in front of you, you're going to be upset. Like that's
Pissed.
your guy.
The word is pissed.
The word is pissed, Greg. You are going to be pissed if you're just trying to play the ADP game and wait on a guy that you really like and is kind of key to your draft strategy. And then if that guy, especially if that guy does go off, like you're going to be kicking yourself for 4 months. You know, it's a long season to pass on a guy who you like because you think you can get him in the next round and then he goes off. Like you're going to be just hating yourself. So
Scott Fishbowl, one guy drafted right before me on every other round. He got Travis Kelce 1 pick before me, and I had Pat Mahomes. He got Zamir White 1 pick before me, and he took Jake frickin' Bates 1 pick before me in the 21st round. 3 times sniped 1 pick ahead where I had the guy queued up. Go ahead, Tipp.
No, that's funny. I know it, and that's the beauty of fantasy football. And you know, I really appreciate again you being on, Pat. But I just want to know a little bit more about the styles of draft that you usually. We know that you love Dynasty. That's your, you really do a great job with Dynasty. But before there was Dynasty, there was just really redraft or some sort of pot type thing where I'm talking the older age. I need to talk more to ask Greg a little bit more about some of those things. But yeah, so I just want to know, like, what is your favorite type of draft league to get into? And also, I did have another question for you. Like, what are some things that you like to do outside of, the fantasy football realm? Because you said something that just stuck with me that I've noticed. I have not been in the industry long at all, but what I noticed is this thing, football, is a year-round thing now. It's not like when the Super Bowl's over, you've got, 2-3 months to just chill and relax. You are already doing dynasty drafts. You're already getting ready for the next, and before you know it, it's already June, and you're in the big time in the draft season. So I just want to know, how did that transition go for you? And what do you like to do outside of, all the fantasy stuff too?
Sure, I'll take that last question first, Tip. I've got, I'm married with 2 kids and a dog, so that's a lot of free time occupied right there. A wife who condones me sitting, looking at Pro Football Reference pages for hours every day, and just long, especially during the season when the work days get really, really long. So, I definitely have to hang out and go on long dog walks with her and watch TV a little bit at the end of the night when I finally shut down the computer. So that takes up a lot of time. And I'm also just a degenerate golf junkie. Not good at it by any means, but I like to try a lot. And it just so happens we live basically, like, if you walk right outside my front door and go straight for about 250 yards across the street, down a path and over a bridge, we're at the 15th green of my little municipal golf course.
Oh, wow.
So,
Time out. Have you ever had a hole in one?
I've never had a hole in one.
Neither have I, but I have had pars, and I've had one birdie, and I think I can count my pars on 1 or 2 hands. I'm basically a double bogey golfer.
Nice. I'm more bogey. And I'm trying to get better. I was briefly better than bogey, like during the pandemic when I just would go out and golf pretty much every day.
You got outside during the pandemic. That's good.
Right. And the nice thing is with global warming, like our municipal course will not shut down unless there is like a blanket of snow. And here in the Chicago suburbs, we'll get a little snow in the winter and it'll melt in 2 days and it'll be gone. Like, I played rounds in January and February the last couple of years. And so, yeah, anyway, I kill a lot of time doing that too. So, but not too much. Don't tell my bosses that I play a lot of golf.
Tip, you had the other question?
Sorry. Yeah, and I'll get to the other one. Favorite league types, Tip. The only things I don't like, well, I haven't gotten into IDP. I don't want to knock it. I know some people think IDP is awesome. My beef with IDP is mainly that I feel like it rewards the least valuable players on a defense, like inside linebackers and strong safeties, and like that's kind of those are the positions that teams like don't ever sink much draft capital into, or it's pretty rare anyway. And I don't like keeper leagues. I want either Dynasty or throw everyone back and everyone starts fresh. Like, I do not, and this is the time of year when I get like 40 keeper questions a week. And like, I get it. People like that. They like to do a little bit of 1 foot in the Dynasty realm where you get to carry over your favorite guys. I get it. I just don't like playing in leagues like that.
Well, Pat, it's hard to get new people to accept Dynasty, because if they screw up that first year, it takes years to recover. And so it's a lot easier to ease them in with keepers and then get them to Dynasty.
Very true. Very true. But yeah, so I mean, I think my favorite kind is a traditional 1 QB snake draft league, but I like it with 14 or 16 teams rather than 12.
Whoa, deep.
I'm in a couple of those. Yeah, I like the deep ones. I like it when every team has an Achilles heel somewhere.
Yes.
And maybe the waiver wire is a little more sparse than usual. Like when there are tumbleweeds on the waiver wire, that incentivizes people to trade, like to go out, because you're not going to be able to plug holes the way you want to your satisfaction just surfing the waiver wire. Like, you got to go out and find trading partners, and I kind of like that challenge. So deeper 1 QB snake draft leagues, that's still probably my favorite.
League vote on trades, or commissioner can override bad trades, or bad trades are bad trades. You can't legislate stupidity.
I like no veto rule. I don't like that, but I do like, we're the commissioner, and I've heard people say there should be a best interest clause where the commissioner can act unilaterally to right any wrongs, but you have to have a lot of trust in your commissioner and know that they're, not going to take sides in anything with the people they're closer with. But I do, like, if anyone, I'm lucky that the one league I'm a commissioner of, everyone knows each other, friends, as mutual respect. Like, no one would try to pull off a lopsided BS trade. So I've never had, but like if anyone did,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think people would want me to act unilaterally if anyone did try to pull off a trade like that and just say, like, no, I'm not letting this through.
The only thing I worry about is collusion. And
Yep.
my opinion on collusion is that if you suspect collusion, you can't do anything. But if you can prove collusion, if through a pattern of trades or whatever, you can prove two guys are colluding to help one guy win to the detriment of the entire league, you reverse the trade and you kick both those guys out of your league. You just get rid of them and replace them because they're a cancer and they're not going to help your league at all. Your opinion?
I like it. I agree. Yeah, I mean, if anyone colludes in a fantasy football league, I mean, come on.
You're right.
Like, and if they would actually conspire to do it, like, there shouldn't be any second chances. I'm with you.
Yeah. Tip?
Well, before we leave, Pat, we just want you to give a quick plug or, about a lot of the things that you got going on in Fantasy Pros, maybe some things that you're going to be, doing podcasts as well with Fantasy Pros. Anything that you want to plug, we would love to hear it.
Hey, and get to Pat's podcast, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I'm telling you, they have some of the best podcasts out there. It's fun. I love the interplay between especially Debro and Pat. Fitz and Debro go back and forth. They do. And I just think you get more out of that type of content than any other. So, yeah, Pat, what are you doing? Where are you doing that? Where can people find you?
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So on Twitter or X, people can find me at Fitz_FF. Go to fantasypros.com. Go and find the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast and the Fantasy Pros Dynasty Podcast. And, since fantasy drafts are just around the corner, I would urge people to try our draft simulator, like our mock drafts. Get your reps in. Now, yeah, you got, and, if you do want to get a premium subscription, modestly priced, and we do give you a lot of data and a lot of ability. Like, if you're
What's
out of
modestly
town,
priced? What's modestly?
yeah, so I think right now, I want to say we're either at $7.99 or $8.99 a month for like the Hall of Fame package that gets you everything. And like, we've even got a feed. You can sync all your leagues through us and manage all your leagues across different hosting sites, all in one place. And if you're going out of town or you're going to be driving on at 10 a.m. on a Sunday, turn on the autopilot feature, and we will like literally set your lineup for you based on optimized rankings and everything. So it's a great fail safe. And if you use that, not only can you just do conventional mock drafts, you can actually program our mock drafts to draft like other people in your league. You can like set the intel, like, this guy always goes late round quarterback. This guy always reaches for running backs in like the first 3 rounds. Like, you can set that all up and have little AI versions of the people in your league and draft that
Does
way.
it learn over years? If you do your league over 3-4 years, does it learn those tendencies?
So, like, that's a good question. I don't know if we actually like track people's draft and come up with those, or people have to input those themselves.
Okay.
But like, we have the ability to, at least at the very minimum, set it manually. But we might actually track people's drafts and have that.
I'm waiting for the AI to tell me what player to take when.
That's coming, Greg. But one thing, if I could talk about the mock draft simulator, that is one of the coolest tools, because if you go to other sites, you have to actually sit there and actually do a mock draft. And sometimes you get pulled away because, this is just kind of a spare of the moment or spare time type thing. But man, those draft simulators, you can get done with those pretty quick. You just set whatever, position you want on the board, and it's really cool, man. I've enjoyed it for several years now. So now I'm happy that you did mention that. And I didn't know that if you get some more of the other subscriptions, that you can even tweak it and do a little bit more to it. That's even better.
So,
Yeah.
Pat, we're going to get Debro on our regular season show. And 2 of the segments we're going to be doing this year. Last year we did studs to sit, top 12 players that you say should sit for that week. Just one player, and it can be any position. And then we track whether they should have been sat or they should have started. And we don't track individually, we track as a team. And we were right, I think, 75% of the time last year, telling you these top 12 players should be sat this week. This year, we're also going to take guys that are not starters, top 13 and later on quarterback and tight end, and 25 and later on running back and wide receivers. And we're going to say these guys should be started this week. Would you be interested in coming back and doing a show?
Oh, yeah. Please reach
Okay.
out. I'd love to come back and talk to you guys some more.
Absolutely.
Oh, we'd love it too. And hey, one more thing, guys. If you go to the expo, first of all, you should go to the expo. Expo is a great place to meet people. Do not be afraid to approach Pat Fitzmaurice and talk to him. So many people there are terrified of Bob Harris and Scott Engel and me and you. And I'm telling you, we love football. We love talking to people who share our passion. Come up to us. Anybody that's been in this industry for 10 years, said it before, I'll say it every time. If you've been in this industry 10 years, you're a good guy. Every industry gets good and bad people. Con artists, scam artists, they don't last 3 years in fantasy football because they get a reputation and nobody will deal with them. So if you've been here 10 years, you can trust he's a good guy, and you've seen him tonight. Pat Fitzmaurice is a good guy.
Oh, thank you, Greg. I agree. We don't bite, and in fact, if you if you buy us a beer, we'll be your friend for life, and maybe even follow you home. So, yeah,
I will buy you a beer this August. I will do that.
That is
Just
a deal.
come up
Greg.
to me, but you don't have to buy me one because I don't drink. I'll take a root beer, but not a beer.
Well, I think I can spring for a root beer. So,
Hey,
yeah,
what time?
looking
What
forward to
time?
that.
You say you do your show 5 days a week. What time is it released?
That's a little variable, I think. Depending, sometimes we release the same day, sometimes the next day, depending on when we record. So we don't have a set release time.
You guys edit your videos after you record them?
Yeah, we have a production team.
You're like professionals and crap.
I'm not, but some of the people I work with are.
Oh, that's so cool. Anyway, thank you very much for coming on. We will get you on again. We love it. If you ever need a guest, Tipp is available. I would love to come on, but Tipp is the brains of this outfit, not me. I'm the humor. I'm the comic relief. Tipp is the brains. So, I mean, he knows the coaches. I don't know the coaches. I took 5 years off. I don't even know the backup players. I have to research before I do anything. So, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me, Greg and Tipp. Really appreciate it.
you.
Great talking to
Appreciate
you
you so
guys.
much. Absolutely.
JC, take us home.
Here we go.